Step by step from scratch, let's see how can we create a complete template in Excel to track income and expenses. And throughout this process, we are going to learn many cool and interesting tools of Excel, such as a option list that automatically change the color of the cell based on the value and depends on the type that you selected. The category list also updates for you. And also with this template in Excel, you can know where is your income coming from and where is your expenses going to. Let's get started by creating the first tab or the first sheet where we are going to have the lists, income and expenses. Let me click on the number 1 here to the left, because that way I can select the entire first row. And then I can go to the Home tab and change the fill color to a dark blue, for example. However, be free to use the colors and the design, the layout that you like the most, okay? Now in cell A1, let me type in the name of this tab that is going to be lists, enter. I want to click again on the cell A1 and increase the font size and change the color of the font maybe to white. I can put everything in bold and move on to the second row. I can use a different color, maybe a orange one. And I can narrow down this row, okay, like this. Now we can go to the lists itself. And as I said, we are going to have 2 different lists. The first one, income, and the second one, expenses. Underneath income is where we are going to type all the incomes that we have, such as wage or side hustle and so on, okay? And in the expenses, you are going to write all the expenses that you have, such as rent, utility, bill, car insurance. Now that I'm done with the lists, income and expenses, I can increase the width of both of those columns, B and D. So let me first select the column B, and then I can press and hold down the Control key on my keyboard. But why is that? Because that way I can select both of those columns at once and evenly use the same width to both of those columns, right? So press and hold down the Control key, column D, okay, both are selected. In between column D and E, for example, I can click, hold, and drag to the right, like this. And I can, as both of those columns are selected, I can go to the Home tab and vertically and horizontally center the informations. In column C, that is the column in between, I can narrow or shrink this column, okay, like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select income, wage, side hustle, and this entire list all the way down to the 3rd row, for example. However, of course, you can select more and more rows. And then I can go to insert table. My table has headers, okay. I think it's very important to create a table in Excel because table has many benefits that I'm going to show you in a minute. Let me select now the expenses all the way down to the row number 3rd, and then again insert table. My table has headers, and then okay, that's it. What I'm going to do is my first table has a name of table 1 and the second as table 2. I want to rename those tables to match with the header name, income, expenses, okay? But why is that? Because when we are about to create the second sheet or the second tab, we need to specify what is a income and what is a expense. So though it is going to be very important, because if we use income, Excel know we need to pull information from the income table. And if we are using outflows, expenses, Excel knows that we need to use the second table, right? So let me click first on the first table here to the left and go all the way here, table design, and all the way to the left, table name. It's going to be income. Enter. This name needs to matches with this name right here, okay? And if you prefer, you can click in the first table and change it colors, like a green one. And the second one, expenses, we are going to do the same process, change the name here at the top. And if you prefer, you can also, instead of use blue, you can choose a different color, such as orange. Okay, now we're done with the lists. Here in the footer, I can right-click on the sheet 1, and then I can go to rename, and I'm going to give it a name such as lists. Enter. Now I'm about to create a new sheet, so I need to click in the plus sign to add here this new sheet, right-click, rename. I'm going to give it a name such as transactions. This tab is going to be very important because it's where we are going to record all the transactions, or money in and money out. And that way, this tab is also going to help us to understand where our money is coming from and where the money is going to, let's say. So let's go and create the header. However, instead of set and do all those steps again to create a header in Excel, we can go back to the first sheet and simply copy and paste the header that we already have. Of course, we are going to change the name. However, it's very simple to do. So let me click on the first row, click, hold, and drag until the third row. Now we can copy using Ctrl-C and then paste using Ctrl-V. Copy and paste. Okay, so let's go. Copy, go back to the second sheet, click on the first row, Ctrl-V, copy and paste. Okay, the header is done, but we only need to change the title of the header, right? So I'm going to give it a name such as transactions. Enter. If you prefer, you can also change the colors and on and on. But I'm going to leave this as it is, okay? So now let me go here to the fourth row, and I'm going to start to create the table itself that we are going to use to register all the transactions, money in and out, inflows, outflows. The first information that I think is very important is the date. So let's say date in January 1st of 2026, I had a transaction. However, what type of transaction? What type? Is it a income or expenses? So it can be either one. That way, I think it's better instead of manually input over and over again the type, we can create a list in Excel to help us better entry those values. So let me get rid of the second cell. And in the first one, I'm going to click and then data all the way to the right, data validation. And then instead of use allow any value, I want to allow a list. And this list of mine is going to contain basically two options. First, income, comma. I need to use comma here in Excel to separate the two options, to create options. First option, comma, second option, comma, and so on. Income, comma, and then expenses. And be mindful because the name that we are using here, needs to match the names that we used before in the tables, right? So, okay, yeah, that's it. Now we can select both options, income and expenses. Let me increase the width of column A and also column B. Now we can move on to column C. So in January 1st of 2026, I have a transaction that is income, and the category of this transaction is going to be one of those options that we have on our list, such as wage, side hustle, or if you have expenses, rent, utility bill, and so on. Now let me go back to transactions and how can I connect, or in, let's say, a proper Excel language, create a dependent drop-down list. I can use the indirect function in Excel. However, let's first click on the cell category, right? And then data validation. Instead of allow any value, I wanna allow a list. However, I'm not going to manually input all the data that I have in my table, but I'm going to do something dynamic with the equals sign and the help of indirect function. Indirect, open parentheses, and then I need to just to use the coordinate of the cell that indicates what is the type, what is the list that I need to use. Do not click, okay? Be mindful, calm down, do not click anything. Just refer to this cell right here, B5. This is the cell that I'm going to use. So let me input here, B5, close parentheses, and then enter. If the type is income, the category is also income. If the type is expenses, the category also match or corresponding to the table that we set before. But anyway, let me go back here to income. And by the way, I think it's very interesting thing if income automatically be filled with a green color and we highlight the expenses with a reddish color, right? So let me click income, home tab, conditional formatting, highlight sales rules, equal to. Every time I have income, I want to fill with a green color. However, if I have expenses, conditional formatting, equal to, I want to highlight the expenses with a red color. Yeah, it's done. Okay. Now we can change automatically the color, depends on the value of the cell. And visually, it's going to be very good. So income, wage, and let's say now that we have date, type, and category, another crucial information is going to be the amount. How much, right? So as this is basically a weekly wage, I'm going to use here $750. And as I said, dollars. So I need to make sure I format correctly this number. So let me go to the home tab, and here I can choose the dollar sign to make sure this is not a number anymore, but a accounting number, let's say. In the last column here, we can maybe create notes, because that way you can type in any other information that is important for you, such as, let's say, this payment here was paid via a bank transfer. Okay, now I know because I have the notes to help me. And as we did before with the lists, as you guys notice, I click, hold, and drag all the way down the table. This is why we have a lot of blank rows right here. I'm not going to do the same with the transactions because it's not required. But why? Because a table has many benefits, and whenever you add new informations into the table itself, the table is going to adds automatically a new row for you. So you don't need to click, hold, and drag all the way down the conditional formatting, the lists, and the formats, okay? So let me show you here. I'm going to select everything, and then I want to center horizontally and vertically. Insert table. My table indeed has headers, okay? So make sure you mark it this checkbox, okay? If you want to, you can give this table a name such as transactions, but it's not required, okay? You don't need to. And you can also change the colors, the layout. I'm going to stick with this option right here. Okay, that's it. And as I said before, you don't need to push the rows of this table all the way down, because look here, if I add a new date, January 2nd, 2026, enter, the table automatically pulls a new row for you. And then you can choose here the type, let's say expenses, and as the category, I'm going to choose transportation, $100. Okay, yeah, that's it. So we're done with the transactions. I'm going to just pause the video a little bit to fill up with different informations here, just random informations. And then we're going to move on to the last tab of this spreadsheet, that is going to be the dashboard, where we are going to be able to analyze everything. Okay, now I have a larger table with some transactions. We can move on now to the dashboard. So let me click on the plus sign to add a new sheet, and then right click, rename. We can give it a name such as dashboard, enter. To get started with dashboard, I think it's also very important to create a header. So as we did before, let's copy the first 3 rows, Control C, go back where we want to paste, select the first row, and then Control V to copy and paste. However, I'm going to change the name to dashboard. Another very interesting thing that I'm going to do here with the dashboard is I want to select the 3rd row and all the way down, okay, maybe until the 5th row, because that way we can change the fill color to maybe a gray one. I think it's very interesting because that way we can get rid of those grid lines of Excel. What I'm going to do is, as we are going to use this transaction table for a long period of time, of course we are going to have many different dates, months and years, January, February, March, April, and so on. However, if we want something very specific and handy to track and to know what is going on a specific month or week or year, we need to have a start and end date. So let's say start date and then also end date. But why is that? Because the way we can specify what period range we want to see, okay? So let me select both of those cells and a little cell here underneath. Home tab, I want to center horizontally and vertically. I want to give all those cells a board, increase a little bit the width of column B, and put in bold. Okay. Start date, I can change the fill color of the background to maybe dark blue, like this one, and also the end date. And I can also change the color font to white. And within those cells where I need to write the date, I also want to change the color, maybe to white, just to highlight those cells. And this way we know that we need to input some data here. So let's say January 1st of 2026 until January 31st of 2026. This is the range that I want to analyze. And of course, in the transactions, I have a larger range, February, March, and so on. However, I'm only going to analyze this range right here. And if I want to analyze a larger range, I just need to change here the dates. Very simple and straightforward. The focus here is to set up everything, to use the formulas that are going to help us create this specific analysis. Now that we set up here the start and the end date, we can move on and bring those lists that we have to our dashboard. But why is that? Because that way we are going to know exactly how much I have for wage, side hustle, rent, utility bill, and so on. So I want to know and analyze each item per category, income and expenses. What we can do here is, in a column to the right, maybe column, let's say column J, I think it's, or column I, okay, I think it's good. In cell number 4, I'm going to type in income. And in the next column, I need to type in total amount. And then I'm going to skip one column, expenses, and again, total amount. So what I'm basically do is I'm going to bring the values that we registered before in the table to this table right here. But if I just do something simple, such as equal sign, and then go back to the list and click on the first value that I have, and then enter, of course, I can bring that value to this table. And if I click at the bottom right corner, click, hold, and drag down, I can bring all the results. However, look what is going to happen here. If there is no information or a blank cell, Excel is going to return a 0. However, I don't want to return 0 if I have a blank cell. I just want to return blank. So how can I change and change the 0 to blank? I can use a very simple if formula. So let me open the wage, that is the first cell that I have, 1, 2, where we did the first formula. Now it's very important to select everything but the equal sign. You don't need to select the equal sign, select everything else, and then you can copy the information with Ctrl+C. Of course, later on we are going to use Ctrl+V to paste, but let's keep up first with Ctrl+C. Ctrl+C. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is get rid of everything but the equal sign. Okay, so equal sign, if formula, double click, 1, 2, if, Ctrl+V, if income is equal to nothing or blank, that is open and close quotations, comma, I also want to retrieve or return open and close quotations. Else, on the other hand, if it's not true, if income is not equal to a blank cell, I want to return the income itself. So again, Ctrl+V, close parentheses, and then enter. At first look, nothing changed. However, if I go to the first cell again, in the bottom right corner, click, hold, and drag down, look what's going to happen. No more zeros, but just blank, as we did have in the tables. Now we can go all the way up and make sure we put some borders. Okay, now let me select both of those columns, center horizontally and vertically, put borders, increase the width of the first column, and by the way, we can click in the column I and L on those two columns and increase evenly the width of those columns. I can do the same thing for column J and N. Click, hold, and drag to the right. Okay, that's it. Let's make sure we do the same process to expenses. So equal sign, if, open parentheses. I'm going to do just a little bit different this time. However, the process can be the same. Equal sign if my table here is equal to open close quotations or blank, comma, I want to retrieve a blank cell, comma, else retrieve the cell itself. Enter. That's it. Let me select here everything at the bottom. Now here in alignment, center horizontally and vertically, put all borders. Now I need to select the second row at the bottom right corner, click, hold, and drag down. Because that way we can make sure we bring the entire list. Expenses, income, both are done now. Let me select here income, both of the headers, and I can go to the home tab, put in bold, change the fill color maybe to a green one and the font to white. I can do a similar process to the expenses. However, this time I want to use as the fill color a red one. That's it. And again, let me select all the list that I have within income and use just a light green. And I'm going to do the same process to expenses, but using a light orange. But the big question is, how can I return the total amount, not for everything, but just for the specific income and expenses? Because if I use here a sum function in Excel, a sum function is going to add up everything that I have. But I don't want to actually add up everything, but just the items that correspond to my criteria. And to do it, we can use a sum formula in Excel with a condition that is Sumifs. Let's get started first with the expenses. But why? Because expenses has more items. Let me click in this column K, hold and drag to the left, just to make sure we can shrink a little bit. Total amount is going to be equal sign, Sumifs, double click, 1, 2. The sum range is going to be here in the transactions section, let's say. And sum range specifically is going to be column D, comma. Now let me click on the formula bar, or in the formula bar, okay, in the formula bar, because that way Excel is going to give us this little tag and we can read and figure out what Excel is asking us. Criteria range 1, or first criteria range. The first criteria range can be the column C, comma, and my criteria is going to be here in the dashboard, the expenses items that I have here to the left. And we're done. So simple as that for now. Okay, let me hit enter. Rent is equal to $5,000. And by the way, let me change the format to dollar. Okay, but remember, we done 100% right the addition, a sum function in Excel using a criteria to just add up the values that we need. However, it's missing something. That is the date, start and end date. So we actually need to include start and end date as a criteria. And to do it, let me click in the total amount formula that we did, 1, 2, and in the last parenthesis, I can go and get rid of the last parenthesis, comma, and this time I want to add a second criteria range that is going to be to add up all the values that are equal to or greater than my start date. So let's go. Criteria range, of course, is going to be here on transactions. In the first column, A, because this is where I have the dates, comma, Now let's find out here what Excel is asking us. Criteria 2. So what is the criteria for this situation? So pay attention. Open quotations. I want to add everything that is greater than or equal to close quotations. Greater than or equal to ampersand. This symbol is crucial to couple what we're going to do here, because we are going to couple the logical operator that is greater than equal to with the date. Okay, so greater than equal to the date that we have here. So everything that is greater than or equal to this date is going to be added up. But we're not done yet. It's very important to make sure you fix this reference because we are using cell B5. However, if we bring the formula down, B5 needs to be B5. It cannot be B6, B7, B8, and on. It needs to be locked in B5. So let me select here all this reference, and then I can press the F4 key on my keyboard, F4 key. Or you can manually input $sign before the column and before the row, comma. Now Excel is going to ask the third criteria range, that again is going to be the date. I can go to the first column, comma, and the criteria is going to be something very similar. However, this time, open quotations, less than equal to close quotations, ampersand, and then we can go back to the dashboard and select the end date. Simple as that. I almost missed something very important here and crucial, that is to lock the reference. So F4 key, yeah, I done, enter. That's it, 1000. Let me click, hold, and drag down. Okay, we're done. And look how it's working. Rent is equal to 1000. However, if I change the end date to maybe March 31st, enter, the value is completely different. 3000. Okay. We can do the same process to the income. So let's do it. But by the way, I don't want to lose this much time or expand this much time doing the same process over and over again. So what I can do is I can basically copy and paste the same formula that we did here to the expenses. So let me click in the cell, want to select everything, including the equal sign, copy, and then you can go to the escape button in the keyboard, okay? Now let me go here to the total amount, 1, 2, and then paste everything that we did copy before. The only thing that we are going to change here is the reference. Instead of using the expenses, we are going to use the income. But where should I change this reference? If you pay attention, you have a very narrow line, blue line here. This line is a reference of the expenses. So try to very carefully click on this line, hold and drag down, and then to the left, and then put on the income that you need. That's it. Enter. Yeah, we're done. So let me click on the cell, change to $, click, hold, and drag down. That's it. And yeah, basically I'm done. So this is how we can do income, expenses, add up values with a criteria in Excel, and so on. Something very important here that I'm missing is the total amount of the total amount, okay? So I want to add up those values. To do it, we can do the calculation underneath the table or at the top. You do what you think it's the most, what is the best for you. However, I think I'm going to include this calculation here underneath, but I don't want to include this calculation at the bottom here of the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a little bit, or I'm going to get rid of some rows that I have here. To do it, let me click on a blank cell, Control C to copy, select a couple of rows here, and Control V to paste. That's it. Now in a row underneath, I can type in total, and also here, total. That's it. Equal sign, now it's very simple. Sum formula, 1, 2, select everything that we have above, enter, and the same process can be applied to the expenses. Yeah, that's it. Now let me select here all the things that I have, center in the middle, vertically and horizontally. Let me select just the first portion here, and then put borders, put in bold, change the fill color to a green one, and white font. I'm going to do a similar process to the expenses, but instead of use green as the background, I'm going to use a dark red. That's it. Now it's time to create some charts here in Excel to better visualize the data that we have. And those charts can be a very simple chart, such as a donut chart or a column chart. So let's start with comparing the total of income and expenses. And to do it, I need to click first on the cell of income and then Control key, press and hold down expenses. Okay, so I select both of those cells, insert a donut chart like this, because that way we can compare both of those values. And I can bring this chart here to the left like this, a little bit. Let me shrink a little bit and increase the width a little bit down like this. Yeah, I think it's perfect. The chart title I'm going to change to income versus expenses. However, we have a problem here. I don't know which slice is for each category. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to see what is the largest value that I have. It's the green one. So the largest slice needs to be green. So this is a very handy and easy way to separate those values, right? So let me click on the slicer and then right click, format data series. Before we change the colors, we can do some change in the layout. Let's first of all start with angle. That is a very cool effect that you can apply to basically rotate the donut. I think I'm going to use maybe 30. Donut explosion is just to separate a little bit one slice from another. And donut hole size is just to shrink or make the hole larger. I think I'm going to stick with 60%. Now I can go here to effects, shadow, and use a shadow. And now it's time to use the colors. But before we do it, let me go here to border, solid line, and use a black border. That's it. Now I want to click again, however, just in the blue slice, because this is the largest one, and change the fill color to green. That's it. And the other one I want to change to red. By the way, I think I'm going to use some lighter colors. So let me go here again and change the fill color to a light orange and the green to a light green. Yeah, I think in my opinion at least, it's better. However, if you pay attention, there's no value at all here. There's no labels, so I don't know how much the green and the orange represent. So what I can do is I can click on a cell and then again on the chart, and all the way here to the top I can go to chart design, and all the way to the left add chart element, and then data label, and then data call out. In my opinion, those data label here are the best ones. Let me click on this legend right here and get rid of, delete. Now we need to just make sure we change the layout and the design of this legend. So right click in the legend, format data labels, and all the way here to the left, to the right, we can also check value, for example. And now let me go back here to the label options and get rid of the category name, because we don't need to. We already have the colors to indicate what is income and what is expenses. So I think we are almost done. The only change that is left in here, I think, is I can click on the Home tab and increase a little bit the font size of the data label like this. And if you go here to the right, instead of use the separator to split the information as a comma, we can use a new line. I think it's the best option. And we can also go here to Effects, Shadow, using shadow, and as the fill color, we can use maybe a gray one. And as the border, maybe a black one. Yeah. Maybe we can use a lighter gray like this and put in bold. And as the background of the chart, I can click, go to Shadow, Effects, and go here to a shadow fill. I can also use a gray color. However, as the border, I can use a black one. Yeah, I think it's very good. Let me close this right panel. And the only two charts now that are left, I think, are the ones to compare the income with itself and also the expenses against each other. Because if you take a look here on the expenses, for example, you don't know what are the categories you expend the most. So I think a chart can be very helpful. So let me select first the incomes, like this. Insert a data chart, like this. Let me put this chart right here. And also I want to select the expenses and insert a data chart, like this. Let me click and bring it down. Okay. For those two different charts, I'm basically going to apply the same layout that we did before. However, the only change is going to be, as we have on the same chart, the categories for income, and then on the same chart, expenses, I'm not going to use green and red because it does not make sense. I'm going to use different colors. So let's say expenses. I can go here to chart design and all the way to the left, change colors. Here you can use many different fill colors, as we can notice underneath there in the chart at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to choose here a color that I like, and then I'm going to apply. And guys, I'm done. There's not much more I think I can do. The only thing that I want to show you is if I change here the date, so let's say January 31st, 2026, enter, automatically the chart, the table, and everything else is going to be automatically updated on the dashboard. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to create from scratch income and expenses tracker in Excel. If you have any questions or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you in the next one.